What you want more than anything is you want to meet people with different experiences. And I've always sort of found you would see things that you would not automatically have come across.
Hello and welcome to the Leaders Council podcast, the podcast for the people who run the country and the people who keep the country running. I'm Scott Challinor, and once again, I'll be exploring a new perspective on leadership, joined each week by a different CEO, CFO, director, government minister, president, and who knows, maybe even one day the president of the United States of America. That is, if he makes it beyond this November with all going on in the world right now. The aim here is to discover who these people are. The people who get up each morning and make this country work. We discuss everything from R&D, recruitment and sales to the potential of North Wales. And of course, the innovation and success that makes it entirely worthwhile in the end. We also get their take on the current economic and political landscape here in the UK. I'm delighted to be joined on today's programme by Richard Davies, Director at Moretube Engineering. First founded in 1987 and based in North Wales, Moretube specialises in pipe welding and fabrication, general fabrication as well, and also on-site installations. Davies himself has always run the business with the view that sustainable growth and client satisfaction take precedence over turnover and profit. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome Richard Davies. Okay. Richard, very warm welcome to you, and thank you ever so much for taking the time to join us on today's programme.
My pleasure.
Now, Richard, you're, of course, very active as a business in providing solutions for the manufacturing sector. Tell me, with the outbreak of COVID-19, how has it been for you as a business attempting to navigate the last few months? Because I can imagine it's posed some incredible challenges.
Yes, it has actually. Initially, we were all caught up in it. We work for main suppliers like Tata Steel, and they obviously had to reduce the contractors that they had on site to make a sort of safe environment for them. So we had to look at trying to bring work to our workshop initially, but inevitably we took the furlough option, and we were off for about a month. And then a small team, we were brought back to help out really with their emergencies, because they still get emergencies cropping up. So yeah, we've still got a small team, but we've still got a lot of staff on furlough. So obviously, when we were coming back onto site, the sites that were asking us to do work, we were working within a different setup then, with masks and social distancing. There was, bottlenecks maybe in the canteen areas, different risk assessments that we had to work within their set of rules as well as our own set of rules. So it's been challenging, yes. But obviously it's doable. It's doable. But even to the extent where you might have one person in the van, where you might have had two or three. So that we're finding there's more cost to doing the work that we that we'd normally have. So, but we're lucky to be working at the moment. So that's where we're at.
It's interesting, Richard, that you do mention costs there, because we're already seeing impact on industry, such as inflated prices in the supply chain, for example, as a result of this pandemic.
That's true. Yeah, we found that.
And what do you think the long-term effect will be on the industry that you're in because of this at the moment?
Well, the long-term effect, I think it will have an impact, because obviously the way that manufacturing is running and the way that people go about their daily basis, just by implementing the rules and the new rules, with the social distancing, etc., and what I mentioned with vans, what we found with suppliers is that we've looked at buying materials which we previously had quotes for pre-COVID. We're finding that there's been an increase in their materials. So certain suppliers are taking advantage of the fact that they've got it and you need it. And you have to pay for it if you want it type of attitude. So, and work that we priced prior to COVID, we're going to obviously, the work will slow down. We won't be as productive. Speaking from my own as a welding fabrication side, we can't be as productive as we were because of the rules. We've got to maintain safety. It's the obligation that we've got as an employer. So that eventually will, that cost will knock on. I think the cost will knock on possibly to the to others. But whether there's enough work as well, we might have to look at our own pricing. Is there enough work around for everyone as well at the end of it? So it is up in the air, really. I think the cost on the industry will, we'll either absorb it or we'll be looking for work and we'll take it on the chin.
Absolutely, because I would say the response from the government has been encouraging from the small business loans perspective and, of course, the job retention scheme as well. But there's always that looming possibility of increased taxation, for example, to cover the cost of that scheme. And that's where the can's been kicked down the road a little bit, isn't it? And whether there's something almost looming on the horizon for businesses to have to take yet another hit.
Yeah, I think we're expecting a tax increase. We're also looking at, possibly, hopefully, future work with the likes of Wilver Power Station, HS2. We've got work. We've got our current suppliers. We've got a clients and whatever that we're supplying to. But we're also looking at, hopefully, I'm hoping that the government will realise that there's going to be a gap. There's going to be a gap in work for the likes of us, and they could start release some of these big projects that they've been, like you said, kicking the can down the road, and hopefully we can see a glimmer of hope when it comes to the future. Because we can gear up to sort of that sort of higher spec type of work. It's very difficult to see where the end of this is going, and the costs related to it will be. But if the government will release some of these projects, which I hope they will, then we can invest in them and see a future.
Let's certainly hope so, for sure, because there will inevitably, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, be a delay in infrastructure investments, for sure. I mean, it is a real shame because Rishi Sunak's March the 11th budget, of course, was quite clear on its promises of infrastructure investment on the one hand. But then COVID-19, of course, came along. But the other big challenge, which again we'll probably find out more about over the course of this month, looming on the horizon, is the future of Brexit and the fact that we don't know at this point whether there will be a trade deal with Europe or not.
And that is what we've had, really, is a COVID-Brexit sandwich, haven't we, really? I was looking at Brexit again. You follow it on the news, but there's only so much doom and gloom you can take as a small business. And I think some of us are, keeping it small. We're concentrating on what we've got. We're focusing on the work we have and the clients that we've got. We're trying to find out what financially they've got to spend this year. And I think looking at Brexit on top of all of it, it's a real concern. Again, we're hoping that there's going to be benefits out of it eventually. Maybe going it alone. The jury's out really on that one as well. It's very uncertain really where this is going. But certainly, I think it's a massive challenge for the government, isn't it? Really, to try and. I was personally waiting for Brexit to affect our business, but COVID's come along, so we sort of financially geared up for it. we'd, as I said, we were looking at bigger projects to sort of, 5-10 year projects, like the big infrastructure projects, to sort of maybe capitalize on those. And we were doing sort of what we call a fit for nuclear. So it was it was above and beyond ISO 9000, and it's an accreditation that would maybe get us work on the likes of these power stations. But again, they've been shelved because of Brexit. Uncertainty, and they're very uncertain about making working towards finalising a deal, and putting it to one side because of Brexit. And now it's COVID's got in the way, and obviously it's terrible. There's lots of people lost their lives through it, but hopefully that the other side, we'll see some definite green shoots, and obviously there was talk about apprentices. What are the youngsters going to look forward to after all this? So yeah, we would like to see, some sort of throw the kitchen sink at the economy as well now. I mean, we're in trouble financially. Taxes are going to go up. I think everyone understands that. But we might as well be a country which is bouncing back. With a good 5G electric rail and everything else. We might as well hopefully invest heavily in the country and get everyone back to work and getting everyone's, technical advancements in their own business and meet the challenges that we could be facing. So so.
It's interesting times, isn't it? Because it's really forced the hand of businesses to innovate where they hadn't before. Also, there's a great deal of uncertainty as to what the new normal that everybody's talking about is going to look like as well. And that will be the big challenge when work starts to resume, won't it? Just being able to carry it out under these new COVID secure regulations. And of course, there's again fierce debate on how clear those regulations are coming from the government as well.
Exactly. Yeah, it is moving quite rapidly. Really, what we've got to do. I know there's regulations come out today on insolvent businesses and on what they, new laws coming out. The main thing is really for me personally. I can't speak for all businesses, but I think what I've done personally is just kept closely, ringing up the people that I do work for, ask them what hopefully they've got to spend. Are they instilling funds for projects? Are they pulling capex back? What's the future work? And working mostly, if you can, there is ways of working around COVID on site. Obviously you can limit exposure to other people and whatever. I mean, construction sites, they still need to we still need to make money, but there's basic rules to follow, and I think most people can follow the rules, and work safely, and it obviously there's no option other than to do that. So I think it's uncertain. It is uncertain with regards to what's gonna happen. But I do believe that it's not impossible, and I think everyone's willing and waiting to get on with it. I'm certainly willing to get on with it, and I think the challenges will be met. I think no doubt we'll get over them. Yeah, absolutely.
And there's been a renewed focus during this time as well, as one of the positives to come out of this tragic time, on mental health on the one hand, well-being on another, but also sustainability is another issue that's really come to the fore during this period of self-reflection. And so moving forward from here, meeting, of course, climate challenges is going to be another big thing that we're going to have to tackle, isn't it, further down the line?
It is, yeah. Obviously, we're touching on this. We've got a net zero, I think 2050.
That's right.
That's another. Yeah, that's obviously that policy's been written in stone. let's hope that we can get these projects up and running. There's lots of new industry. There's a new industry, really, a green revolution, really, that our youngsters can focus on. Really, if they get the opportunity, the apprentices now. Hopefully, we can look towards the wave. There's wave, tidal, photovoltaic, wind. It could be an opportunity. It could be a great opportunity to springboard the UK, and we could lead the way in this. I mean, there's been talk of it, but I think we need a bit of action on it. We definitely need some influence from the government to get these projects up and running. There's 5G, there's real-time data, there's all sorts of innovations coming through. But we're just awaiting some signs of confidence, really. Business is ready and waiting to adapt, and I think I personally would change my, we're welding, fabrication, pipe work, but we certainly would be looking at a route towards that if that's an up and coming industry. So the hope's there. We'd like to create something as well. The UK has always been a country of we're grafters at the end of the day, and we just need an opportunity now. I think Brexit's brought us down a bit. COVID's brought us to our knees, really. When you're talking about the mental health, I mean, even people on furlough that I've talked to, they're just stewing in their own juices because obviously people are worried that if a company can do without them for so long, will they have a job when they go back? There's lots of people talking that way, and whereas initially it was maybe nice to do their gardens and catch up on a bit of maintenance around the house, I think this particular month is starting to grate on them a bit. I think people are getting very concerned that there's a great risk through mental health. I've seen it and I've heard enough about it as well. So I think that is a challenge. And of course, when people come back to work, because they've been in hibernation, which is virtually what it is. When I come back after being off for a couple of weeks, it takes a long time to get the old brain back into gear. The body clock's been used to maybe late starts, and there is a health and safety issue to that as well. It's like when you come back off a 2-week holiday. This is a 3-month total break from work, and people aren't going to be. They're not going to be firing on all cylinders, really, and their bosses are going to want to see a bit of action because they've been dormant as well. So there's going to be a little bit of interface there, I think. Yeah, definitely. There's definitely a mental problem to it, but obviously it's a lot better than catching the COVID and maybe coming down with it. So there's just a balance really between the economy and health. And I think the government's done a great job with putting their hand in their pocket. Certainly help businesses from using up either a lot of their capital or going under. So I don't think they could have done any more. And I think obviously we're going to pay for it in these tax increases that you mentioned earlier, but I don't think people the general public are going to be opposed to it. But I do think that we're going to have to go a little bit further and create more work to basically get the economy up and running, because Brexit's going to create a financial burden as well. So if we get big projects going, 5-10 years work, lots of money flowing into the local economies, and of course, where I am in North Wales, it's you tend to see North Wales as maybe North East Wales or Wales in general, more of a farming sort of where you go on holiday. But North East Wales, Wrexham Industrial Estate, where I am in Wrexham, that was That was the biggest industrial estate in Europe at one point, and it still is one of the biggest. We've got Deeside. We've got a hell of a lot of engineering companies like myself that support a vast range of companies, for everything from JCB, Tata Steel, Toyota. We've got Kellogg's. We've got a vast range of big global brands, and we can definitely cope with some decent projects up here, and it'll, the rising tide will float all the boats hopefully up and down the area, and we're able to put something back in. As I said as well, we can definitely get the youngsters involved and give them a little bit of hope and a little bit of future, because it must be getting quite desperate for them as well. There's nothing but negativity all the time, and if you're a youngster coming up out of school, out of college, it's looking pretty grim. I think we need to give them guys something to work towards as well.
I think that's completely right. And this period has really brought the best out of businesses in terms of innovation. It's ready to adapt even further to meet the challenges of the future. And often you hear it said as well that you learn a great deal in times of adversity, more so than when things are going well. And there have been some incredible stories of people really stepping up to the plate, both on the front line and in business, whether they've had to adapt to remote working or keep going into sites. Have you been inspired by the reaction that you've seen from those around you at Moretube, Richard? And have you really learnt anything from this period about the company as well and the staff that work for it?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think you have to have a pretty decent backbone at the moment. As I said, we're looking micro rather than macro. We're hunkering down. We're putting our shoulder behind what we've got. If you start to expand into the future, like I said, it's until we lift the restrictions, we're not going to see the economy bounce back one way or the other. So, we've the small gang that we've got are trying the best to meet the challenges, and we're getting on with it. And I've always been proud of my workforce. I've got to be honest with you. I never expect anything less than 100% because they never give any less. So they're no different now to what they were pre-COVID. They're a fantastic bunch. I've got two sons as well that work for me. Most of my employees have been with me a long time, and they've helped this business grow. And I'm indebted to them, for the efforts they've put in, and I always will be. I'm a firm believer that the company is the employees. There's no two ways about that. They create the product. They're your sort of link between you and the company when they're on site. The health and safety and the quality of work is judged on a daily basis. And if that's not the case, then you get to hear about it pretty quick. So yeah, I've always been impressed with my lads, and and I hopefully always will be. So there's nothing changed there. It's still doing 100%.
And if we just look for a moment back at the Parliamentary Review article that Moretube Engineering wrote, just for those who haven't read it, talking about the future of the business, you mentioned that one of the key elements of that is investing in the future, not just in facilities, but also in staff members. And given the sharp rise in unemployment as a result of COVID, and also the return of the immigration bill to Parliament recently, that's going to be hugely important for the future, isn't it? Recruitment, essentially, of young British youngsters.
It is, yeah, and one of the key things is raising the bar and raising standards and getting more competent with what we're doing. And a lot of companies are looking at competency as well. Even though you could be a fine welder, or they're still looking at the add-ons. It's the extra training and the extra, but one of the things that we've looked at is bringing on our welders. I don't know if you know about, if we were to talk about being the coded welder, where your welds are subjected to X-rays and using different materials to get different standards, etc., etc. This is on the back of this Fit for Nuclear. The problem with training and the problem with raising your standards to work in an industry that you're not actually working for that at this particular time is that the cost that you're putting on the company to raise the standards, really, you can't pass on to your current clients because they don't require that particular specification. So it's a bit of the chicken and the egg, really. Raising standards and it's just what we aspire to do. Is also this is what they were saying about future investment in the country with the likes of nuclear. We're looking towards getting involved with that sort of high end specification. The accreditation and investing in people is what I think we're 80% compliant at the moment, but we've got to push it that extra bit. But there is a cost, and this is where we're at a situation where we need to see some movement on things now for us to go the last 20%. We still maintain a high standard. We still got obviously training and specifications that we live up to anyway. It's just that we to go that extra, push that extra, accreditation levels that we need does cost money, and that's unfortunately one thing that we might have to hold back on at this stage. We'll have to wait and see. It's not something I want to do, but we'll investing in people is really the only way forward. But we'll wait and see which way these. I think September we'll hear about Wilbur on planning, and we've invested in property up there, and I think we're in the process of buying some land to put another workshop up there in mind of that work. So it's not just investing in people; we're investing in real estate, and these are things that we're looking at closely now to make sure that they do move in the right direction for us. But as regards to your staff, if you like, the people that work for you, it's a constant improvement process, and that's that will be the case. But to go the extra mile is it's something that we might have to just put the brakes on that a little bit now on the likes of the Fit for Nuclear. But I'm sure we'll it's something we can restart again moving forward. We can get going again pretty quickly on that.
Let's hope so, certainly. And there'll be a great deal of leadership required, of course, to take the business into the future, as it's taken a great deal of leadership to sort of see it through the crisis thus far. And leadership is something that during this discussion, Richard, I would like to sort of discuss in the context of Moretube and your career, and sort of bring that into focus a little bit. First and foremost, one of the important things about leaders is to be able to inspire a team of people around them. Looking back, who have maybe been some of the biggest inspirations in your career, or if there's no real people that stick out, what have been maybe some of the most influential experiences that you've had?
Oh, that's another good question, really, because I've had I've been inspired by quite a few people I've worked with, and one of those was my father. Oddly enough, he's a pipe fitter, and he it was actually in the Parliamentary Review. He ended up working upon the Howard Doris Ninian Central platform up in Scotland, and he was pipe superintendent on that, which was the biggest rig ever built in the world at the time. So again, you've got a North Wales guy or a Welsh guy going up and actually working on one of the biggest jobs in the world. So it's an inspiration. He brought he brought drawings back off this oil rig. Obviously, they weren't top secret. They were given out to employees to show their families, and some of them were showing the height of it compared to Nelson's column, and and as a young lad, I couldn't get over it, and pictures of the rig as it was getting built. So I was very inspired by that, and the stories that he was telling me about the divers and the welding, and it got me interested in the job itself. So me and my father went. I was 17 when he made me a partner of a business, and we started off together. So I was very much out of my depth at the start. I still am, I suppose, in some ways. But and he gave me the opportunity to work with him and share the ups and the downs. There's sometimes we called ourselves self-unemployed, because we were between contracts, and obviously the legacy is now that I've got two sons and a son-in-law that actually work for me. So yeah, and I've met some interesting characters along the way where they've, it's quite a rough job really, welding, and fabrication, and you tend to meet characters along the way that you listen to their stories, you're always inspired. The people working all over the world, Saudi Arabia, Canadian pipelines, and people riding shotgun, making sure the bears don't carry you off into the woods and all this type of thing. So yeah, it's a good job to be in. Very, very inspired, very creative pipe work and welding fabrication, and it might not seem it, but some of the systems you put in, and it's automated, and they press a switch, and then it does the job that it was intended to do. And you might have been involved with it from the start, or would have been involved with it from the start, and it's punching out a product that the other side. And the bigger you get as a company, and the more confidence you've got over time, the bigger and better the jobs that you do, and it never fails to impress myself and what's achievable. And and when you see the youngsters come up, you give them work to do, which is obviously not too technical, and then they advance. So I get a lot of inspiration from not only from the older generation, like I've mentioned, but also the younger generation that they sort of come on leaps and bounds, and you see them mature, and they end up a very good tradesman at the end of it, and that inspires me as much as anybody, anyone that I've looked up to, and I've always inspired by anyone that can do something I can't do, like Steve in the office. He might do things that I can't do on the computer, and I find that an inspiration, even if it's printing something off sometimes. He's listening now, Steve, there. Yeah, so there's no there's no end to learning and being inspired by other people. There's not.
Exactly, and it goes to show as well with the examples that you named there, Richard, that some of the most influential people out there can be those closest to us, be they family or colleagues. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if channeling your business experience and what you've learned from others, you had to give some advice, perhaps as somebody who is about to start their first day in a leadership role, what sort of advice would you go about giving them?
It depends if they own their own business or whether they're running the business for someone else. It does make a big difference for that, really, on how big the operation is. I've always found that I think running a business for me personally, I'm very hands-on. As I said, I'm a tradesman brought up into the office environment. My natural habitat's on the shop floor in the thick of it, really. So I tend to sort of maybe have it. I don't know if it's unique or whether it happens with other directors, but I tend to get involved. I'm very much on the shop floor. If I was starting a business, if I was to advise anybody, that's going into business, I would advise them to definitely keep a very decent cash float going in within their business, and not try to expand too quickly, and maybe they want to run before they can walk. You need cash. Cash is king, and especially in a time like this, businesses might go under because they can't maybe absorb some of the additional costs because it's not coming. We've been going 32 years. We have had rough periods, and we've learned by them. So as a leadership, I personally, wouldn't ask anybody to do anything I wouldn't do myself. Sometimes we do a lot of work, maybe over Christmas and shutdowns and long hours and weekends. And I tend to sort of, how can I put it? I work with the lads, alongside the lads, so that I tend not to ask them to do anything other than, as I said, what I wouldn't do. It does depend on what you're doing as a business. It's a difficult question, really. There's no golden answer to that one. If I'd have had a bit of time to think about it, I think it's strong leadership. Definitely leading by example. Don't spend too much. Keep a little bit in the bank. Have a positive attitude. Treat your, I don't like the word staff actually, but treat the people that work for you with a great deal of respect, and they are the people that are producing a product or a service for the company, and ultimately that's all that a business is. Surrounds itself by its employees, and that they are the backbone of the company. So keep a real eye on how they're getting treated, and treat everyone with respect, basically.
I think that's incredibly sound advice. I think that is incredibly sound advice. That's about it on that one.
Yeah. Keep it real.
For those listening in, I think that's incredible advice, Richard. And we've had a look back, of course, over inspiration. So I think before we do wrap things up on the programme today, it only serves right to focus on the future for a moment. Over the next 12 months, what do you envision for yourself and for Moretube Engineering? And what do you really hope to achieve as we hopefully move through COVID-19, emerge from the other side, and really look to the future?
Yeah, it's funny because I've had ups and downs with my feelings on being very positive and being quite negative. It depends on who you talk to and what your outlook is. I've had both, but generally I'm an upbeat guy. As I said, I'm looking at focusing on what we've got. I'm looking at the clients at the moment. I understand that they will hopefully support us, and I think we've helped them over the years as well. So there's that mutual benefit going on there. This year, I don't think we're going to break any financial records. I think we'll keep it. We'll keep it tight for now. We'll make sure that we've got money coming in, money going out. I'm optimistic. That I do think that the economy will rally, and that they say it's going to be 12 months, but that's 12 months going up, not coming down. So each week will hopefully benefit us a little bit more than the next. And we'll spend and invest as we go along. Even through this, we've had to keep certain things up to date. The cranes, we've had to have loaders on, and so that when we do get work, that we're ready to move. We're not waiting on things that have come out of certification. So we're looking at the bigger picture in that respect. I think we're a steady caution, really. We're gonna get out of this. We're gonna move. As I say, we'll move forward. We'll keep it simple. We'll obviously try and look at what improving on, maybe planning, getting a little bit more, a little bit more sort of dynamic with work, so that we get as much out of the day as possible without whipping the lads. Sometimes I think when you get too busy, that you're racing ahead. So I think a bit of planning might help to just get a little bit more money out of a job just on purely labour side, and make sure that is planned properly, and we've got our times used better, if you like, in that sense. Maybe towards Christmas, hopefully next year, things will get better. Of course, this COVID had come upon us right at the end of the financial year, which is April. So most people's order books were running dry anyway. People obviously have got their budgets for spending in manufacturing with maintenance budgets and capex and projects and whatever. So, we'll have to wait and see. Most people have only just come back. Actually, most people have been working at home, so there's a lot of people come back, and they're just finding their feet. So, we can't jump on people to see what's too early to see what they've got for us. But I'm sure that we will progress through this year with small increments and small steps, and we'll get more positive as we go along, and we'll pick our feet up towards the end of the year. But I think we just got to, as I said, bit of planning, keep our spending down a bit. Maybe not spend on the luxuries that we would like to have had. But again, stopping spending is what's going to it's what's going to stifle the economy. So I think once people get confidence and once they get signs of confidence, work coming in, I think we'll all start to ease up a little bit. We're scared at the moment to do anything which is going to burn up cash. So I think definitely towards, if it's going to pick up, which it will, I think we'll just see growth back in the economy and a renewed confidence, and maybe we might come out of this the other side with a new energy. We might come out of this with a new sense of purpose. Because it has brought the country to its knees, but it's also been almost it's been so dramatic. It might show people that we might have lost the path. So hopefully it'll be a new energy and a new way of working. We might all be looking to work as not as the enemy, but as an essential part of life, which we might have forgotten about. Because without work, a lot of people have been reminded that work is very, very important, and without it, we wouldn't be too far down the road financially speaking. We'd be in lumber. So we could be. It could be a new energy up and down offices and factories and workshops. People be glad to be back at it. So that could be a bonus. I think. Hopefully, it will.
It's going to be interesting for sure, just to see what the new normal looks like and just how things do pan out in the future for sure, Richard. And even though we are just about out of time today on the programme, I think it would actually be fantastic to catch up in the next few months to discuss how things have changed when we begin to understand more about how that new normal will be and what sort of recovery we can expect. Because
that'll be my pleasure. Yeah.
Likewise, because it's been an incredibly informative experience today, Richard. And I will thank you again for your time taken to come onto the programme. It's been a real pleasure speaking, and most importantly, do take care and do stay safe with everything still going on in the meantime, because we are not out of the woods with this yet, are we?
We are not out of the woods. You're quite right. And my pleasure for talking to you, and I'll be delighted to speak to you shortly, and we'll see how we get on. I'm sure. I think things will. I think we're at the bottom now. I think the only way is up, and I think there's a lot of maybe a bit of positive energy might be buzzing around. I'm sure that the economy will bounce back, and I look forward to speaking to you next time around.
Likewise, Richard. Do take care. That was Richard Davies, Managing Director of Moretube Engineering. I hope you enjoyed the interview and, of course, learning more about how the whole team at Moretube is continuing to raise standards even throughout this challenging time. Coming up next on the programme, I'll be handing over to Matthew O'Neill for his exclusive interview with Lord David Blunkett. Lord Blunkett is an active member of the House of Lords, a former Labour MP and Secretary of State, and also the chairman of the Leaders' Council of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Despite being blind from birth, Lord Blunkett rose to prominence to become one of the most notable politicians of his generation, holding a number of senior positions in Tony Blair's cabinet and serving as the MP for his Sheffield, Brightside and Hillsborough constituency for 28 years. He was elevated to the House of Lords in August 2015, anointed Baron Blunkett of Brightside and Hillsborough, and I hope you enjoy listening just as much as Matthew enjoyed speaking with him. That's coming up next.
Lord Blunkett, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's very good to be with you.
Well, of course, nothing is being said at the moment other than COVID-19, which we must touch on. What would your message be to small businesses who are trying to keep going?
Well, I think the last ones standing will be the ones that thrive when we get back to some sort of normality. So it's have confidence and courage. Obviously take advantage as far as you can of the government help. I think that Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, has gone about as far as you could have expected in the circumstances. There are obviously small businesses that fall between the cracks. Those who don't have defined premises can't benefit from the business rate waiver, have not really been able to demonstrate that they can adhere to the PAYE for furloughing staff, and of course whether they can receive the grant, 10,000 or 25,000. All of those who can are obviously able at least to benefit from that for the time being and look to the future. But I think the second thing to say, and they don't need me to tell them this as a politician who did once do a business studies qualification, which is that it will be a different world, and being able to think about how that world will look in a year's time and be creative about it and learn from not just what's happening to you at this moment in time, but to others around you and the sector that you're working in, that will be really important.
Do you feel that the long-term effects of the COVID-19 outbreak will in some ways be positive for British industry?
Well, only in the sense that people are having to be creative, they're having to adjust and innovate. Therefore, they're thinking about more productive, if you like, greater productivity ways of delivering the same service or delivering the same products. And in that sense, I think we'll have temporarily at least very much higher unemployment than we've become used to, but we'll probably have a burst of productivity, which will help with the recovery. Whether it will help with the inequity of the way in which our economy is imbalanced, both between services and productivity and the production of goods and services, I'm not sure. What we will need to try and do is to ensure that the geographic imbalance that exists is, as far as humanly possible, is dealt with by both the entrepreneurship and innovation from the bottom up and targeted government help, which will still be needed. And we are now in the throes of the kind of borrowing that we saw back in 2008 to save the banking and economic system. We're having to do that to save the whole of our productive business and commerce, and I think that will have to be sustained for some time.
Do you feel that people will take a second look at global supply chains in the wake of this outbreak?
I think there's going to be much more creative ways of using local supply and linking up inside sectors much more effectively. And I hope that the Leaders' Council will be able to play a part in that, in the sense that people who have something in common, a synergy in terms of what they're delivering, whether it's a service or whether it's manufacturing or whatever, will be able to see that there's a good outcome from knowing the sector better, linking with people, not just geographically, locally, but those in this country who may not have been on the radar in terms of what they produced for the supply chain. And of course, ensuring, because there's quite a lot of fraud going on as we speak with people getting into cyber attacks, that they'll also take account of going into the cybersecurity side effectively as well. The more we are online, the more people who are working from home, the more vulnerable those businesses and their supply chain become. And that's something to think about as well.
How important is strong leadership at the moment?
Well, I actually think that it's brought to the fore leadership in a whole range of areas, from obviously government itself, and there's been ups and downs with the Prime Minister's severe illness, but all the way through the public and private sector, people have, to use the jargon, stepped up, and they've shown local, regional, and national level the kind of leadership that Britain historically was very good at. Regrettably, we've not seen the same on the international scene for all kinds of reasons, but maybe we will in future. So I think out of this will come experience of people who have seen an opportunity to do good, as well as seen an opportunity to provide a good service or goods, including, for instance, shortages for the health and social care system, the food chain and the like, but also I think in terms of seeing the synergy between the private and the voluntary sector and using people's commitment to each other in a very positive way. I'm not sentimental about this. Things will revert. But actually, I think there's a kind of moment of moral judgment of people feeling that they've got a role to play outside the immediate survival that they're engaged in. And if we can hang on to a little bit of that social responsibility, that will be a very positive outcome.
Absolutely. Now, what's your broad view of how the government is responding to this? Are you broadly supportive of their measures?
Well, it may surprise people to hear that I have been very supportive. Of course, there's been legitimate criticisms about the speed of response on protective equipment and on issues relating to testing. But my own view is very similar to the challenge that was made to the Prime Minister of Italy when people said, why didn't you close Italy down faster? And he said, a fortnight before we did it, I would have been considered to be a madman and nobody would have agreed to do it if I'd tried to move too quickly. And I think that's something that we need to reflect on here in the UK. We may have seen the signals elsewhere across the world and taken them more seriously at the time. Hindsight is a wonderful thing, but as someone who's had his life in the opposite political party to the present government, I think that with some hiccups and mistakes, they've not done a bad job in what has been incredibly difficult circumstances.
And you're absolutely right. In a liberal democracy that we live in, it's very difficult for people to swallow orders given to them from government.
Well, the UK and the US, and to some extent the Scandinavian countries, have a very different history and therefore interest in maintaining the freedom to decide and the persuasion and consent that's required. Those countries that have experienced one way or another totalitarianism over the last century have a slightly different way of coming at this. I don't want to exaggerate it, but I think that that's why getting the balance right of getting people to go along with what you want them to do in their interests as well as the nation as a whole is a sensible, proportional balance. And I think we now need to adjust to the coming out of the crisis gradually, readjusting to recovery in the same way.
Now, something you've mentioned recently on this balance is the police overreach in the enforcement of the COVID-19 structures that have been put in place. What have they done right, and where have they gone too far?
Well, I think that they were interpreting what was not necessarily as clear advice as it might have been for all kinds of reasons, because people were feeling their way. I think what's come out of it has been a demonstration by local police services in some parts of the country that they could get people to do what was needed without the heavy hand of drones overhead or people being told that they shouldn't be walking in the street, because this was all about self-isolation, not incarceration. It was about getting people not to pass the infection on to each other and therefore to provide distance rather than to make our lives a misery. Those police services that adopted that policing by consent and chivying people along did really well. Those who went over the top, I think, soon got a very substantial pushback. And one of the strengths of our democracy is that you could have that debate. People could say, I'm terribly sorry, we think the police force in our area has gone over the top. And that in itself is a constraint and a readjustment. That's another strength of living in a country where you can have opinions and express them without actually being thought to be a fool.
Now, of course, the government has faced criticism that they were slow to react, and Boris Johnson wasn't present at the early COVID-19 COBRA meetings. Now, Number 10 has claimed that this is normal practice. The health secretary often chairs COBRA meetings related to health. Does this tally with your experience as a Secretary of State, or would you have expected the PM to be more hands-on during the initial stages?
I think different prime ministers do have a very different style. And Boris's style, which I think will now be considerably adjusted, was very swashbuckling. In some senses, delegating is a good thing, as every leader of every business or public service knows. Those who try to pull too much into themselves end up with a massive bottleneck, great failure of trust, and the inability of people to show what they're worth and to demonstrate their capability. So I'd be very wary of jumping in and saying he was wrong to delegate the essential COBRA meetings. What I was surprised about was that he didn't chair the first couple, because my experience with Tony Blair for the 8 years I was in Cabinet was that Tony was a great delegator, but he would get a grip to begin with, watch what the difficulties were, and then give people direction and confidence to be able to get on with it. So looking back, I think Boris himself probably thinks, God, I wish I'd spotted the signals from elsewhere in the world more rapidly, and I'd just been there. However, this also raises another issue. All of us in positions of leadership need good teams around us. I think after this is over, he will be assessing those who really did step up and those who demonstrated their inadequacy. I think we'll probably end up in a year's time with a much stronger cabinet than we have today.
Well, absolutely. And of course, we've seen a significant drop in the visibility of certain special advisors like Dominic Cummings during this entire period. So it'd be interesting to see how that pans out.
It's certainly readjusted the role of those behind the scenes with those who should be taking the decisions, having received advice. Obviously, there's been a complete transformation in the profile of experts, if I might use that term, who'd previously been denigrated. Scientists, medics, people with behavioral science understanding. My only criticism was, were we getting wide enough advice? Were we narrowing it too much to a couple of key centres in London? But that's because I've always been adverse to everything being London-centric. I think there's great expertise, wisdom, experience out in the sticks, and we should use it.
Rightly so. Now, was pandemic planning part of your time as a minister, particularly perhaps when you were Home Secretary?
Well, it was, but it was on the back of risk arising out of counter-terrorism measures.
Right.
I was the Home Secretary for 3 months when the attack took place in September 2001 on the World Trade Center and beyond. We did an enormous amount of scenario planning, both desktop and real, on the the back of that, it was very heavily orientated to future developing terrorism risk. I certainly got involved with talking about pandemics. I remember being at a seminar in Edinburgh where the university there had done a lot of work itself on the issue of pandemics. And of course, we saw SARS and other things emerging. I think people have criticised the government for not picking up the report from 2015, 5 years ago. I think that what happens is human nature kicks in. You deal with what you're immediately faced with. You can sponsor reports, and this is true of business planning, of course, as well, and scenario planning for what business continuity will look like, recovery plans for business, what will happen if there's a cyber attack, what happens if there's an energy shutdown. These kind of things you can look at, but you're immediately turning your eyes to what's in front of you. And had we picked up a bit more on the danger from Ebola and SARS and what have you in the past, then we might have said, what if something hits us in the developed nations that we don't have a vaccine for, that we can't immediately whisk up protective materials or equipment, or for that matter, medicines that help with recovery, all of which we now see are a danger. I think this will make an enormous difference to the planning for the years ahead. I hope it will be widened so that we don't just look at what's happened, because very rarely do you see something exactly repeat itself. Some of the circumstances will be, but others won't. So that's why I've put emphasis in what I talk about on looking at the other virus, the cyber attack scenario, which could be just as dangerous in a world of just-in-time provision. One of the miracles of the modern developed world, except for the very poor, has been the distribution of food. A lot of it on computerized, technologically advanced systems. If that were to come down, we'd be in real trouble. So I think we need to think those sort of scenarios as well.
So have a full plan across both sectors, biological warfare, pandemics, and cyber warfare.
Yes, and to do so on different levels. I think, again, thinking global but acting local, we need a lot more to think about what would happen if something took shape that actually broke down those national and global chains and how we would cope. And without, obviously, we've got enough fear and anxiety to last a lifetime. Without creating even more anxiety, we can think about those things for the future in a more rational way, I think.
Now, aside from the physical threat of the virus, one of the things that people are vastly worried about is the effect on the economy, not just national economy, but also the world economy. Now, it has been said by certain parties, and I'd like to garner your thoughts on this. Is there a danger of the effects of the lockdown being even worse than those of the virus?
Were it be prolonged, I fear that balance would tip the other way. It is about proportionality. It is about balance. It's the wisdom of Solomon, really, to get the moment right when you start to move and then to move quickly. There's no doubt whatsoever that we are stocking up, not just on the economic and employment front, which will be devastating enough, but on the health and social well-being front, enormous challenges. And they will need careful handling because there's a lot of people whose lives, for a variety of reasons, are at risk in the future on a scale that we've been dealing with over the immediate handling of the pandemic, concentrating really hard on those affected by COVID-19, those sadly who have died or been seriously incapacitated. That will roll over into the economic, the social, the mental health and cultural well-being of the nation, and that will need all of us to pull together as well.
Absolutely. Now, do you believe the government's doing enough for business?
I think that the speed of reaction once the scale of the pandemic was clear was very good. I've praised Rishi Sunak for his action. Remember, a chancellor who only just come into office was planning to deliver the budget in the middle of March and has had at least three equivalent budgets since. I think he's handled it very well. Understandably worried now about what we're doing to our economy. The level of borrowing is sustainable because of low interest rates, but it reaches a point, of course, where it tips over so that you can't then do the kind of structural investment requirements that the government were laying out before and in the March budget. And those will have their consequences as well as a planned payback over many years. I think we've learned something over the last few months. We needed to take immediate action. We don't want another round of austerity equivalent from 2010 through to 2019. I don't think the nation, on the back of what's happened and the challenges we have, could take that. And therefore, we need a different plan, economic plan, over a much longer period, just as we did from the Second World War all the way through to 2002, when the final American loans were paid off.
Now, of course, one thing that's on everyone's lips, how much longer do you believe that the lockdown can go on for?
I believe that we need to be substantially back in action as an economy in June. This obviously is led in terms of places where people would meet in large numbers, having to adjust to the fact that it will be longer for them. And sadly, that will involve business closures. It's why the Chancellor extended the furlough scheme to the end of June. Mm-hmm. But unless we get things moving in June, I think we'll run into the summer where all kinds of services and industries will have a chain reaction effect. And what happens with one will then have a major impact on another. And then you get the skittle effect where things get knocked down that you hadn't perceived were going to be affected. So I very much, if I were in government, and I always think of things in that context, what would I do if I were in government? I would be on the side from the second week in May, on the side of the hawks in terms of saying we've got to start moving, and we've got to do so with the collaboration and cooperation of the public who have got the message, who did behave, who responded magnificently. Let's try and get back, perhaps, doing things differently for a time, but substantially getting back to business as usual. Unless we do that, then those areas that can't and wouldn't expect to be back in action immediately get pushed further into the middle of the year and the autumn, and then they become unsustainable.
Now, of course, one of the other major developments we've had recently are the changes in the Labour Party. So if we could just speak on the Labour Party for a while. This might sound like an obvious question, but how does Sir Keir differ from Mr. Corbyn?
Well, I'm biased because I believe the Labour Party has come out of 4.5 years of a black hole of a nightmare, where it neither represented a credible opposition nor an electable government, and the combination was to let those who supported the Labour Party and needed some of its policies let them down very badly. Sir Keir Starmer both is a highly intelligent, professional lawyer who, as Director of Public Prosecutions, led the service well, had to take difficult decisions at a time of austerity, understands the world beyond Labour members, but has been able to do business with those who originally supported Jeremy Corbyn and was able to command support from them. His creation of a balanced shadow ministerial team has been very encouraging. I supported Lisa Nandy, who he's made Shadow Foreign Secretary, because because I thought she understood the north of England and the disaffected former Labour voters. But I believe that Sir Keir has taken on board those who have something really sensible to offer. And I believe he will be both a great leader of the opposition. More importantly, he will then present himself as a credible alternative Prime Minister. And all governments need an alternative government at their shoulder. It was true of us from 97, and it took the Conservatives some time to recover and to get to that position, but they did, and the Labour Party will, and that's crucial for our democracy. All of us need to understand and appreciate that a living, breathing, functioning democracy requires a credible, confident, and in many ways supportable opposition, as well as a government that we clearly want to do well, because none of us want, as we didn't with the COVID crisis, none of us want the government to fail. We want to see our economy recover. We want our social well-being to be taken into account. We want to overcome deep-seated inequality and poverty. And we want to do it with enterprise and entrepreneurship and business playing their role. And that is about leadership nationally, locally, in the private and the public sector. People with ideas, with confidence, with the ability to pull teams around them. Above all, to have some idea of what it is they want to achieve and a very good idea as to how to achieve it.
Now, of course, one of the biggest problems Sir Keir is facing will be tackling the party's anti-Semitism problem. There has been a recent internal report that has been quite damning. What's your response to that report, and what does Sir Keir need to do in response?
Well, there are two reports. One which is being produced by the Equality and Human Rights Commission, which he will, and has already indicated, will implement in full. The second was a leaked report put together by the supporters of Jeremy Corbyn, 800 pages of private interchanges on social media, which he has, Keir Starmer, set up an investigation to identify who did it, who leaked it, what the content was, does it have any salience and lessons for us, and where necessary, action will be taken. So I hope that as he moved very quickly to reassure the Jewish community, so he will be able to take the necessary steps to back up that reassurance with the kind of actions that says that this was a blight on a historic, great political party that all of us were ashamed of. We've been able to put that behind us and to move on to facing the future with confidence.
What's the one key thing that Sir Keir needs to do to restore Labour as an election-winning party?
I think Sir Keir Starmer's major challenge is to convince sceptical voters that Labour has not only reverted to a party that they can support because they can see it acting, developing, presenting as a credible alternative government, but also that the lessons have been learned from the fiasco from 2015 onwards. In other words, there have to be very clear signals of substantial change, not just the right words, not just reassurance that we're not going back to some of the crazier policies, but actually that we've understood why the electorate rejected those policies so substantially in December 2019. If people get that message, they'll understand that the Labour Party has changed, as it did in the 1980s and early 90s, to become the electable government with the greatest majority and historic majority, even greater than 1945, which I was privileged to be able to take advantage of in 1997 when I joined the cabinet.
Now, I know what your answer is going to be to this question, but indulge me. Do you think Sir Keir has what it takes to be PM?
Yes, I do. I think he has the background, he has the experience, he has the professionalism, he has the forensic mindset, and he has the confidence to have put a team around him which will ensure that it will work. And those elements are true of all leaders. Ideas, the ability to build a team, to have confidence in that team, and to be able to demonstrate leadership in practice, sometimes at the most difficult times. And, the Leaders' Council, those sharing their thoughts with the kind of thing that we're doing now with a podcast, but also joining us in linking up in that network of people who can support and help each other and learn from each other. That is what needs to be done in politics as it needs to be done in business. Thank you very much indeed, Matthew.
Well, thank you for coming on the program. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to speaking with you again.
Thank you very much, and good luck to all those listening in what has been a nightmare scenario. Good luck for the future. Have courage, have confidence, and yes, listen to those who know more about business than I ever will.
Thank you, Lord Blunkett.
Thank you.
As always, it has been a pleasure both listening to and learning from our guests. I've been your host, Scott Challinor, and I hope you all enjoyed listening. Until next time, since sadly all of the pubs remain closed, I'll be sitting in my front room and raising a glass to raising standards. Hopefully, I'll be back in the usual spot in the Westminster Arms soon. Remember, do look after yourselves, stay home where you can, help control the virus, and help save lives. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. You can find every episode on iTunes, YouTube, and Spotify. The views expressed by each guest in the podcast are their own. They do not represent the opinions of the Parliamentary Review, Westminster Publications, Lord Pickles, Lord Blunkett, David Curry, or any other guest on the podcast. If you'd like to know more about the Parliamentary Review, please visit www.theparliamentaryreview.co.uk.